Hi everyone and welcome into Leah Binges because my name is Leah and I like to binge watch a lot of movies and TV shows, and today we are obviously going to be discussing Stranger Things Season 5, and I say obviously because I know I'm a little bit late to the game with this and it's already been talked about to death with like 6 million other people on the internet also talking about this, but here we are and there's so much to get through, so I'm going to try and not do a whole bunch of rambling in the beginning and also throughout the whole video because I already know it's gonna be like an hour long, so strap in, I guess. I do want to give one disclaimer, which is that this show was never one of my favorite, like all-time favorite shows. I did enjoy the previous seasons, but I didn't engage in any online discussions, or fandom discourse. I was more of a casual watcher, and I just want to put that out there because I'm probably not someone who's gonna like have every detail ready to go. Despite that disclaimer, let's be real, the ending was bad. It really was. The writing was just terrible. And I have 7 pages of notes, so let's jump in before this video ends up being 2 hours long. My main problem with Stranger Things has always been the formatting of the show. It was one of the first shows that set the standard for a 3-year wait in between seasons with only 8-episode seasons. I genuinely miss the 22 episode seasons that had filler episodes and enough watch time for characters to receive enough attention and proper writing to be given to the storylines. I loved like early 2000s through 2010s TV because we had like so much watch time. Shows got like 10 seasons with 22 episodes, so there's so much to watch. But Stranger Things was one of the first like big successes that Netflix had that sort of set the standard for these smaller seasons that people could binge in a short amount of time. And I don't love that new format to TV, so I do have a little bit of a grudge against Stranger Things. Season wise, I understand that season 1 was phenomenal and I completely agree with that, but it ultimately should have ended with just one season. It's no secret that Stranger Things was originally written and pitched as an anthology series, meaning that each season would have had its own storyline dealing with different characters, and that means that season 1 was originally written as a complete storyline. They didn't have all 5 seasons mapped out originally, which I feel like so many people on the internet talk about, like the genius writing of the earlier seasons and how that led up to season 5 and how there were so many hints earlier on. Season 1, they didn't have this plan going in, so I don't know what people are talking about. Only due to the massive unexpected success of the first season did they decide to extend the story and continue it, but that's why season 1 is always going to be superior. The characters were written with depth and nuance, and each one was given their own time to shine because it focused on a small town horror mystery. No one could imagine this happening in this small town. We have the core 4 boys with this mystery surrounding the disappearance of one of the boys, and we get the family dynamics and friendship dynamics that tie into each of their storylines. And so it was complete because you had that core 4 close-knit of friends to return to, with then the introduction of 11 as well, becoming more of a core 5 to return to anytime there was an issue. Moving forward, I did really enjoy season 2 as well. It did feel like a natural continuation to season 1, and the vibes truly did stay true to the original season. Characters were still a major point in the writing, and the overall sensation that I got from watching season 2 was the same as season 1, so it just overall felt like a great continuation to the storyline. Season 3 is kind of where we went off the rails a little bit. Season 3 is actually one of my favorites, although I know a lot of people hate on the writing. And I can admit as well that the writing is not the strongest in season 3, but it is one of the most rewatchable in my opinion. Max truly gets a chance to shine as a character, and we meet Robin, and I love Robin, and then I love Sadie Sink and Maya Hawke in their roles, so I really appreciated them as additions to the main storyline. The Scoops Troop in season 3 was genuinely a highlight of the whole show for me, and it gave a much needed sense of comedy and like a feeling of lightheartedness that the first 2 seasons didn't necessarily have. However, despite season 3 being my favorite, this is definitely where the show lost its focus and its heart. It became much more neon and oversaturated in vibes rather than the very dark and gritty first 2 seasons. And they completely changed the villains in season 3 and main plot points. We changed from the US military being one of the main villains to now the Russian military is one of the main villains. And it was just this very weird tonal shift in going into season 3 that was weird. At the time, I didn't think it was weird, but now if you rewatch the show, you definitely feel this shift going into season 3. However, it was helped due to the characters. The characters help it keep its soul. And season 3 is definitely when you started to feel the formulaic nature of the show, because the first 2 seasons and now going into the 3rd season, they did the exact same format with splitting the characters up into their own separate little groups, and they each have storylines and discoveries, and then come 2 episodes before the finale, they all meet up and catch each other up on what they've learned and what they know, and then they piece it all together. And I did like that format, but come season 3, that definitely was the format of the show. Going into season 4 did not do it for me. I know everyone loves season 4, but it became more of a coming of age story to me than a mystery. And I didn't love the changing of the villain to Vecna instead of the Mind Flayer. It felt like they just needed to make up a new villain just for the hell of it, and it was very disconnected from the rest of the story to me. The first 3 seasons very clearly outlined the Mind Flayer as the big bad of the series, and then come season 4, they're like, oh, actually not anymore. Vecna's been controlling him this whole time, and Vecna's been the main villain this whole time, and not the Mind Flayer. And some people love that. It wasn't my cup of tea necessarily, because I think they did really good villain writing on the Mind Flayer. And then now come Vecna, I was like, okay, we're just trying to one up our previous villain, and I would rather we just focus on the Mind Flayer again. Now leading up to season 5, they truly hyped it up in everyone's mind. They were talking about, oh, the theme of this season is a traitor. There's 5 confirmed deaths. Everyone was hypothesizing about which main characters would die. They were talking about a time jump and possible time travel. They were really hyping up the queer storylines and Will's coming out. It was marketed as the biggest season yet, how it would answer some of the major questions left unanswered in previous seasons. One of the things that I saw probably a month before season 5 started airing was the Duffer brothers came out and said that one of the biggest questions that everyone has had is who opened the door in season 1 for Will to get taken. And they were like, season 5 is definitely going to address that. And then season 5 did not address that. They didn't discuss it at all. So we still don't totally know that. That's a whole separate issue, because I know the Duffer brothers have switched up their answers to questions, but we'll get into that later. And yet, come season 5, it was a huge letdown based on the amount of hype that was leading up to it. There are still so many questions and major plot holes. They didn't answer any of the questions that people had. There were essentially no deaths for the season. And the whole season was just a bunch of emotional conversations between characters that meant nothing. I put emotional in quotation marks because they were emotional for the characters, I guess. They all thought they were going to die, and so they would get together talking about, oh, I love you, and I've really cherished your friendship, and you've helped me grow as a person, and then nothing would happen, so it didn't matter at all. It wasn't emotional for the audience, because we pretty much knew nothing was going to happen. They've already established that they won't kill off any of their characters. So they weren't emotional for the audience. At this point in the video, I typically would do a deep dive into all of the different characters and their characterization, their storyline. I'm not going to do that this time. I am, however, going to try and speed run my thoughts on all the characters. I understand that's going to take a long time, so please bear with me, because there are genuinely way too many characters this season, and no one can keep up with any of them. None of the character storylines even matter. Even Winona Ryder stated in an interview that she thinks she's in Stranger Things season 5, but Overall, people online have been saying the same thing. Her character only had about 3 lines this season, and she had very, very little screen time, which definitely is unfortunate considering the vast impact her character had on the storyline in seasons 1 through 3. She was definitely the mom of the cast and was a core part of the storyline, so it's unfortunate that come season 5 she really wasn't there at all. So like I said, I am going to try and speed run my opinions because there's so many of these characters. First up is Joyce. At the ending of Joyce's storyline, she is alive. We see her living happily ever after with Hopper. They get engaged and are discussing moving for a job for Hopper. I think it was to New York. And both of her kids are still alive. So congrats to her. As previously stated, she was honestly missing from this season. Her character was always one of the hearts of the show, and she provided this much needed sense of hope, warmth, and comfort to the storyline and the characters themselves. But she was very empty this season, provided nothing to the storyline whatsoever. I'm sorry for her. She deserved better. Hopper, again, ends we end Hopper's storyline with him being alive. He's getting engaged to Joyce. They're moving to New York to be police chief. He's living happily ever after, but he's now lost both his daughters, which is a gripe I will discuss later. I hated Hopper's ending. He spent the past 3 seasons caring for, mentoring, and becoming a father to 11, only for the audience to skip over his mourning of 11 altogether, and we jump right to him living happily ever after with Joyce. The flip in his character from being the very overprotective, I will burn everything down for 11 to I accept 11's decision to kill herself is kind of crazy work. This was one of the core relationships in the show, and they completely destroy it with the flip of a switch by just letting him be okay with everything, and we never see him mourn her at all. I know people have been freaking out about the plot hole that he is allowed to return to being a police chief after all that has happened. He basically committed like war crimes against the military. But that's genuinely the least of my concerns when they butchered his characterization this season. I guess it was supposed to be healing for him, but it was a drastic jump that made no sense whatsoever. Also, him being strapped up with a bomb halfway through the season was so funny to me, considering they've already showed they're not willing to kill him off. So what are the stakes in having him with a bomb and having this emotional dialogue to 11 halfway through the season? Nothing happened. Again, goes back to my previous point. Next up is Murray. Murray's alive by the end of the season. I included him because he was pretty much a main character this season, but we don't really know much else about his ending because he wasn't in the 18-month follow-up from what I can remember. I genuinely could not care less about Murray, so we're gonna pretty much skip over him. He was funny in season 3, but his character was played up way too much in later seasons. Genuinely just get him off my screen so we can focus on the other characters that have true depth and aren't just for jokes. Just be gone. Next up is Mike. Mike's storyline ends with him alive. He lost 11. He's in Hawkins telling stories, I guess. Basically doomed to be his father and hate his life is what I've seen. I really don't know what to say about him because he was flat all season, similar to Joyce. I think a lot of people were way too hard on him as he was growing up and trying to find himself in the previous seasons. But this season, none of that even mattered because they gave up on his characterization. He barely had any seasons with 11, which is another butchered core relationship. People have already mentioned how his ending is probably one of the worst because he's stuck in Hawkins and is probably just gonna end up becoming his dad, very kind of hateful about his life. He's essentially cut off from his friends and just kind of doomed to repeat history, I guess. Next up we have Will. Will is also alive. I'm gonna say that about literally every single character. He gained powers this season from Vecna because he was like part of a hive mind, and so he's like tapping into Vecna's abilities and was able to like siphon them, I guess. Who knows? But then we guess, we don't really know, he was then disconnected from the hive mind with Vecna's death, and then he moved away for college and got a boyfriend. Sure. I appreciated that we got a Will coming out scene, but it felt very rushed and not concluded properly. I think I've seen that Noah Schnapp has been extremely vocal about how he needed to basically beg the Duffers for a follow-up conversation between Will and Mike. That's just a shame that they didn't want to take the input of a gay actor on how to write his own gay character. I understood why people were mad about the epilogue boyfriend, but genuinely, it could have been worse. With considering the writing of this season, it could have been so much worse. So I'm not gonna harp on it too much. Like, they could have done so much worse. Okay, at least, I'm probably gonna get torn up for this, but like, at least he got a happy ending. It would have made much more sense for him to die. But then they would have been like playing into the bury your gays trope. I don't know. There was really no good ending for Will's character, if I'm being honest. I'm not praising the ending for Will at all, but it's just not my biggest issue with the endings. Like I said, if Will is connected to the hive mind and he can control the Demogorgons and has always felt the pain of the Demogorgons, he should have died when the Mind Flayer and Vecna died. They never explain it, and their follow-up interviews have not explained it at all either. We will never get that answer. The Duffers are like, I guess maybe he got disconnected at some point, it just happened off screen. How is the audience ever supposed to know that? Whatever. This has been your established lore for the storyline leading up to this constantly, has been he is attached to the hive mind, and whatever happens to the hive mind, he feels. And whatever he feels, the hive mind can feel. And now he can even control the Demogorgons, and yet he's perfectly fine when we kill the Mind Flayer. I need to move on, because this is a Duffer Brothers issue that I'll get to later. Not saying I wanted him to die, but these are established facts of the show that are constantly being contradicted, so it's annoying. Next up we have Dustin. He is also alive, he was valedictorian, and he's moving away for college. I don't have much to say about him. He was a standout this season, and he's been a standout every season. He's one of my favorites. I appreciated how they actually allowed him to have feelings and grieve properly and have that survivor's guilt from season 4, as he's essentially the only person that they gave good writing to this season. Him and Steve are always the standouts for me. Next up we have Lucas, also alive, living happily ever after with Max. Lucas was a standout for me this season. He wasn't always a standout, but he was a standout this season for me. I was so thrilled with him and Max getting their happy ending after everything, because he was truly a great friend and boyfriend, sticking by Max's side and playing her song nonstop. He essentially saved her from the upside down, and I'm emotional about it. So I'm so happy they got their happy ending. Now on to 11. 11's ending was apparently an open-ended ending. It was up for interpretation. She helped kill Vecna and the Mind Flayer, but then decided to kill herself to end the cycle of violence and the hunt for her powers. Because her and Kali had established that the military was never going to end hunting them because they wanted to create more people with abilities. So she's like, okay, they're never going to stop hunting me, so I'm just going to die. Sure. Like I said, the ending leaves it up for interpretation of if she actually died or if she ran away to solitude. I don't think we even want to get me started, but we're going to get me started anyway. Biggest gripe with this season, and I hate the Duffers for it, she regressed so much this season. Her powers were weaker than we've seen before, and we barely got to see them at all throughout the whole season. She, again, can only speak in sentence fragments, despite in season 4 she was speaking totally normally and like going to school. She's practically emotionless all season, and her going to Hopper and talking about like, well, I'm not a kid and I'm not Sarah. That's so out of character. Again, butchered core relationship. That's just cruel, because like that is your father, and I will not be taking any questions, comments, or concerns at this time. I also hate both of the endings that they gave 11, because neither of them make sense logistically nor for her character. Let's say she survived and she ran away to live in solitude. Well, that requires Kali helping with the illusion. Kali could not survive bleeding out for hours to help her with the illusion. That doesn't make any sense. Unless Kali getting shot was also an illusion just to lead up to that. But okay, sure, that requires a lot of jumping through hoops, that like this was an illusion and that was an illusion. But in that case, everything could have been an illusion. But if her death was real, then how did she escape the van and run back to the portal without the military seeing? And then the military had the like vibration thing that made her powers not work. So if her powers didn't work, then how is she in Mike's mind to say goodbye? Now, characterization-wise, if her character had died, then that means the Duffers allowed an abuse victim to commit suicide after finding her place in the world and who she wants to be in the previous seasons. That's a terrible ending. And then if she died and she chose Mike to say goodbye to, even though her whole family is sitting there, then that's also a terrible ending. Those other people are her family, and she chose her boyfriend to say, like, I understand that they're in love, but that's who you chose to say goodbye to out of everyone. That doesn't make sense. I guess she already said goodbye to Hopper, but that ending with her and Hopper was terrible. So don't make that the ending. They basically treated her as if she was Mike's girlfriend and nothing else, when she has always been the center of the show. Now, jumping back to characterization-wise, if she were to live, she's now living in isolation, cut off from everyone she's ever known and loved. That is not peaceful. Like, they're trying to make it like she found peace with the waterfalls and blah. That's not peaceful. She's always been characterized as someone who needs human connection, especially after her traumatic and abusive childhood. She basically begged Hopper in season 2 to let her see her friends. She's always used her powers to protect her friends and family. She literally ran away, I think that was season 2, to find her sister and where she came from and a sense of family. She created a life for herself in season 4 with the Byers in California. It doesn't make any sense for her to just want to live life in isolation. That would be horrible for her. Jane Hopper, you deserve better writers. That's all I have to say. I know that was like a 10-minute rant, and we're still not done with characters. Okay, I'm so sorry. But blame the Duffers for this, because we had like 20 characters this season to get through. Jesus Christ. Next up is Max. Again, she's alive. She woke up from her coma. She graduated. She's living happily ever after with Lucas. She's always been one of my favorites, but I really don't have that much to say this season. I appreciate that she didn't die and she got her happy ending, but the logistics of her being in a trance in Vecna's mind this whole time made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. The only other kids who were in the world with her in the trance was because Vecna was controlling them physically too. Like, they were in the upside down and Vecna had his like arm thing down their throats, and that's how they were in a trance. So how is Max also in the trance then if she's not there? I loved her in previous seasons, but this season just felt like they really didn't want to kill her off, so they just didn't really know what to do with her anymore. Again, deserve better writers. Next up, we have Nancy and Jonathan, and I am putting them together because they've literally always been together in storylines. They refuse to give them individual storylines and characterization. Nancy ended up going to college, and then she dropped out to work in journalism. Jonathan is creating some anti-capitalistic cannibalism movie. They broke up and they live apart. Genuinely, what the fuck? I don't even know what to say to that. They should have died together in the goop, because why have this big dramatic and heartfelt speech to each other and then the goop just stops and immediately hardens? That's such plot armor and poor writing, because the Duffers are cowards and they don't want to kill off any of their main characters. Not, again, similar to Will, not saying I wanted them to die, but it would have made sense for them to die. It doesn't make any sense that they just survived. They only survive because they're main characters, and the Duffers don't want to kill off main characters. That's the only reason they survive. Then post that, they break up and live completely separate lives for why exactly? Who knows, because the Duffers surely don't even know. Next up, we have Steve, who is teaching baseball to kids. He's stuck in Hawkins. 10 out of 10, no notes. Him and Dustin will always be perfect, and I have no complaints. I do have some complaints about why is he teaching baseball. We never saw him play baseball. I know there's that whole like theory that, oh, he only plays baseball because Vecna knows him with a bat. Like, we'll get to that later. He should be teaching basketball, not baseball. But whatever, it's kind of a cute ending for him. Next up is Robin. Her and Vicky broke up, I guess. Vicky's not anywhere in the flash forward, and that's another thing that the Duffers were like, we'll leave it up to interpretation. Did they break up? Did they get back? Who knows? You should know. It's your show. Anyway, I'm getting so spirally already. Robin is doing her radio show. I love her, but the writing with her is a bit inconsistent. I appreciated how she could help Will with his coming out, but I hated how they dumbed her down in season 4 and 5. She was such a badass in season 3. She spoke like 4 languages. She cracked a secret Russian code and survived torture. It was like really badass. Plus, she had the perfect aesthetic. And then they started writing her in season 4 and 5 as very clumsy and anxious. They basically took anxiety from Inside Out and ran with it for Robin's character. I don't like people being typecast, and I fear that that's where Maya Hawke is headed, and I hate that for her because she was so good in season 3. Also, why did Vicky just magically disappear in the jump forward? Again, the Duffers don't even know, but could they please write a decent queer relationship? All right, we're getting to the end now. We have Holly. I guess Holly is also just living happily ever after with her friends post their near-death experience. Traumatizing, but in the flash forward is all we see of them is them like playing D&D, so we don't really know. She was genuinely a standout this season. I really loved her characterization and how we got to see a lot of a character that we haven't in the past. It felt a little bit like a breath of fresh air. However, I know this is counterintuitive because we should also be focused on wrapping up the storylines of original characters instead of starting new stories. So it's a catch-22. Getting to the end, I promise. Next we have Erica. We have no idea really what happens with Erica in the ending because she was not in the flash forward. I loved her in previous seasons, but I can't speak to her in this season considering she basically wasn't there. She was there for like 3 minutes. She was wasted potential, and the Duffers had no idea what to do with her character. Another person that truly deserved better writers. Last protagonist we have is Derek. I mean, he was funny, and I'm happy for the actor that this was like his breakout role, but he was just another Murray, basically. He was just there for jokes and nothing else. We didn't see him in the flash forward, so who really cares? Then I'm going to run through the villains. We have Vecna. We never explained Vecna's obsession with clocks from season 4. He was hyped up by the audience so much last season, whereas I never really loved the shift in villains, like I said earlier, but everyone else did. But this season, it felt like they just completely changed Vecna's lore and backstory. I could not for the life of me follow the backstory and timeline of how we got here, honestly. Maybe that was partially my fault because I wasn't paying extreme attention to the timeline, but I would argue that it's more that on the Duffers considering they prioritize big reveals and twists, even if they make no sense. I saw a lot of people online talking about how the timeline makes a lot more sense if you would watch the play that came out between season 4 and season 5, because that dove into Vecna's lore and his backstory and his timeline a lot more. I did not watch that, but I would argue that even the Duffers know that people didn't watch that, because I literally read an interview with them where they said, we know a lot of people didn't watch the play, so like, we were trying not to write like people watch the play, and yet most people online, when they're talking about the timeline not making sense, they're like, oh, it makes perfect sense because if you watch the play, then da-da-da. So they are writing like you need to watch the play. I didn't watch it. If it's not in the show, it shouldn't be that important, okay? Why do I need to watch something else? So I just kind of wish they had kept with the storyline from season 4. Like, we had his family storyline and we had the whole clock thing, and then they just kind of dropped that and they're like trying to give this completely other separate lore backstory for him. I was confused, which may be my own fault. Okay, I wasn't paying that close of attention because I'm a casual watcher of the show. Last but certainly not least is the Mind Flayer. Again, something that they changed the lore of this villain left and right. Does Vecna work for the Mind Flayer, or does the Mind Flayer work for Vecna? Are they partners? Are they lovers? Also, changing the visuals to give the Mind Flayer a body to fight and kill was bad writing yet again. The Mind Flayer in season 1 and 2 was scary and ominous because it was this giant shadow with endless reach, and it couldn't be fought or killed because it would find a new host, because it basically was just matter that was just a dark, shadowy figure. That's scary. That's so interesting, and that's scary. That's such a fascinating villain. Too bad the Duffers didn't know what to do with it. Come season 5, they're like, oh, how are we gonna fight and kill that thing? Let's just give it a random body. Why does it look like that? I don't know. they could have explained a lot of plot holes away with that too, because come the final fight sequence, one of the major questions that people had was, why are there no Demogorgons in the Abyss? Because that's supposed to be their home planet and home turf. So why aren't they there at all? They could have answered that really easily and just said that like the Mind Flayer absorbed the matter of the Demogorgons to give himself a physical body, because that's basically what he did in season 3. It's just like we had all the people that were consumed by the Mind Flayer and then they like mashed together to make a monster. And this season it looks very similar to me than what season 3 looked like. So that's how they could have explained it away, but instead they were just like, I don't know. On that same topic, I'm gonna move on to the Duffer brothers' response to the final season. It is no secret by now that the Duffers need to learn how to shut their mouths in post-finale interviews, because their post-finale interviews made everything worse. Literally everything worse. This was a show that they had 10 years to develop. 10 years. This final season, from season 4 to season 5, they had like 3 years to develop that, maybe even 4, and a $400 million budget to work with. They had a lot to work with. And yet somehow they know nothing about their own show, and it's pissing me off. It's pissing a lot of people off, but it's pissing me off as well, because there were so many plot holes and unanswered questions in season 5. I won't go through all of them in this video because A, it will take me forever, and B, there are a lot more videos on the internet that are going to be a lot more educated about these plot holes. If I probably could say like 6 things and people would be in the comments talking about, well, this made total sense. And I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. I am not that educated about the show to be truly talking about like the plot holes throughout the 5 seasons, and I don't want to do another in-depth watch of it. So I'm just not going to go through them all because it's unnecessary. People did, however, take to the internet to ask any and all questions that they had, which obviously made it back to the Duffers. The biggest question that people had was, as I previously stated, why are there no Demogorgons in the Abyss? Vecna is using Will to spy, and then Will knows about the attack, then Vecna should know about the attack, and then the Abyss is the home planet for the Demogorgons, so why is it not flooded with Demogorgons and Demodogs, and what even happened to the Demobats? Because we didn't see them at all this season, and they were flooded in last season. So what happened to them? The Duffers' response, word for word. Mainly, it's just that Vecna was not expecting this sneak attack on his home turf. Never in a million years could he even imagine that. They're there somewhere. I know I'm not the first person to complain about this answer, but they're there somewhere. You wrote it. This is an issue that I saw someone else talk about, that once you have created a own fictional world, like in sci-fi and fantasy, the writers have a responsibility to do proper world building. And once you've created a world that a lot of writers just kind of forget the world that they have and don't do proper world building anymore, they just assume that the audience should know everything, despite this being a mystical, like fantasy, unrealistic world. So they just decided to run with it, and we're like, let's hope no one asks questions. This is your world. This is your show. You should know what's going on in your own show. Also, as I previously stated, Vecna in season 4 was all-knowing. He knew everything. And even in season 5, he was like, oh, I'm gonna use Will to spy one more time. So if he's using Will to spy and Will knows everything about the attack, then Vecna should also know about the attack. What do you mean he's not expecting a sneak attack on his home turf? This isn't even Vecna's home turf. We've already established that Vecna is Henry, and Henry is from our world. So this is the Demogorgon's home turf. This is not Vecna's home turf. And they're there somewhere. Where? Another major question that people had was, what happened between the 18th month gap in the finale? We have the main characters being surrounded by the military, and then all of a sudden we skip to 18 months later and everything's fine. So did the military just let them go, or what? The Duffers' response, again, direct quote, "In that 18th month gap, I suppose there's not much else to do. You can't explore this other dimension. There's no 11 to chase anymore because she's gone. So my guess is they just sort of slowly dismantled operations and left town." You suppose? Your guess? Your guess? It's your world. It's your show. How do you not know facts about your own show that you wrote? All right, editing Leah here, and I just wanted to jump in because as I was editing this, I had this thought. I firmly believe that the Duffer brothers only introduced an 18-month gap because they didn't want to answer these questions. They just hoped that people would accept the scenes and the storyline that was in front of them and wouldn't ask any follow-up questions. They just decided to have a time jump between Eleven's death and trying to wrap up the storylines in hopes that people would just be like, okay, that works. They didn't want to write answers to these questions. That's why there aren't any answers to these questions. And the audience is never going to get answers to these questions because that's why they wrote it that way. So they didn't have to give anyone answers to anything. Instead of having to write any sort of conclusion, they just decided to have a time jump instead. It kind of ties into something I'll say in the other editing portion, that the documentary for the making of Stranger Things admitted that they started filming episode 8 without having everything written for episode 8. And so I firmly believe that's why they had a time jump, was purely because they didn't know any of this going into it, and they didn't want to write any of this. So they were just like, okay, time jump, everyone lives happily ever after. You guys will accept that, right? I actually saw someone on TikTok talking about the time in between seasons allows for extra time for fans to comb through and learn everything there is to know about the world building and the characters and the writing and the show as a whole. And you're basically punishing your own audience for paying attention because you're not paying attention to your own writing and you're just making shit up as you go along. And then you're like mad that the fans understand the show better than you. You're the one that allowed 4 years between seasons. Of course people are going to know the show better than you. They've had all this time to just comb through the season and you haven't been taking notes on your own show. Since these responses post-finale, even Matt Duffer has come out and said he shouldn't have answered any questions about the finale because he knows his answers are terrible. In his own words, he claims that people should give them a break because he was like sick when answering questions. That is some of the worst excuse I have ever heard in my entire life. That, like, genuinely, I cannot fathom being handed a $400 million budget to work with and 4 seasons to work off of and just being like, I have no idea what I'm doing. What? Give you a break. You had 4 years to come up with something. Literally, the fans handed them so many theories that they could have just taken a fan theory and ran with it. But no, they had to be clever. It's just so mind-boggling to me that this is where we ended up with the show. And then the brothers are like acting like the fans are the ones that are crazy for even considering that this is wrong. As I previously stated, genuinely, how is it possible that you know nothing about your own show that you write and create? It boils down to bad writing and not knowing your own show. Think back to Birthday Gate in season 4. I firmly believe that the spring break stuff was during Will's birthday because they forgot one of their main characters' birthday. They even admitted that they would be editing the scene from season 2 in order to change Will's birthday and correct their mistake. That was the first red flag. This is when the cracks started showing people, okay? Not to mention, people were talking about that if you go back to like season 2, you can hear like clock noises, and so that's a hint to Vecna. And there's like a clock in the background of season 3, and so clearly that's Vecna like controlling Billy. And it's just like, I don't think the Duffers were that clever to begin with. I think people are just picking up on straws because they're not grieving well. And even if there were clock noises in the previous seasons, I would firmly believe that the Duffers just went back and edited those seasons to have clock noises. Because or that, or I just had this thought, or the only reason that Vecna was obsessed with clocks was because the composer of the previous seasons put those clock noises in there, and because they thought it sounded ominous and mysterious and like tension building. And so then when the Duffers were like watching it, they're like, oh, I hear clocks. So like, what if we just built off our villain being obsessed with clocks? Because you can hear clocks in the background. That's such a stupid theory, but at the same time, it's not with how dumb the boys are, apparently. The Duffers have never done well facing backlash, as the cast in interviews sometimes seems kind of scared of them. And the brothers have made some rude comments to the cast when they disagree on the character writing. Noah Schnapp was talking about Will's storyline, and he said something about not agreeing with the writing on him, and the Duffers were like, oh, good thing there's not a season 6 because we would be writing you out. And everyone's like trying to laugh it off, but at the same time, it has this tone to it where you're like, okay, let me just laugh it off because you clearly are serious and I can't be seen as like having an attitude. I honestly kind of love the theory that the previous seasons were actually written by one of the brothers' ex-wife who recently divorced him before the creation of season 5, meaning that this season is the only one that the Duffers truly wrote on their own, and that's why it's so bad. It's such a funny theory to me and could very well be true because that's suspicious timing. And also there's that quote that's like, behind every successful man is an even more successful woman, or like behind every talented man is an even more talented woman. I'm not saying this is accurate. This is not supposed to be like defamation or anything, but the timing is suspicious. I will say that. Overall, wrapping up the Duffers' response, I don't think the Duffers understood what made the show great to begin with. People fell in love with relatable characters and a friend group that could withstand anything. They really liked the mystery and horror aspects of the first season. It was very old school horror, small town mystery horror vibes. The Duffers recently came out afterward and claimed that the show has always been a coming of age story. No, it hasn't. Maybe in season 4 you could argue that it became a coming of age story, but no one watched season 1 going, this is a really great coming of age story. It required world building and the understanding of lore. What show were you watching that you thought this was a coming of age story? No.
Editing Leah here, and I just wanted to pop in because I'm sure a lot of people have already seen the Stranger Things documentary that recently came out. And while I haven't seen the documentary, I've seen a lot of people talking about it on TikTok and posting clips of it on TikTok. And it's now become more glaringly obvious that they had no idea what they were doing. And it just adds on to the idea that the Duffer brothers need to stop talking because they are making things significantly worse for themselves. The fact that the Duffer brothers and other writers, producers on set said multiple times throughout the documentary that episode 8 was not fully written when they started filming it is crazy work. Y'all had 3 years to finish this script and you didn't finish it? It's 8 episodes. It's not that crazy for you to have 3 years to do that. Like, that's insane to me. I've also seen a lot of other people pointing out the fact that the Duffer brothers apparently had like ChatGPT opened on their computer while they were writing it, and they just need to stop talking. They really just need to stop talking. Every scene that I've seen posted of that documentary shows the actors like trying their best to fix the season and like solve a lot of the issues in the season, because they'll stop and be like, hey, is it okay if I play it this way because that makes more sense? Or they start questioning the Duffer brothers in the behind the scenes footage, or they just look completely and utterly confused and like they're totally disassociating from reality because even they know that this is really bad. So I don't plan to watch the documentary. I think I got the gist of things from TikTok, but if you would like to watch the documentary, I'm sure that's just proves how much of a clusterfuck this season was. Why, when you knew that this was like really bad, would you then make a documentary revealing how you had no idea what you were doing? Why would anyone hire you again after that? That's like straight up going to your boss, because technically the viewers are their boss, because if you have no viewership on your shows and movies, then you don't have a show and movie. Like it's not going to get produced if you don't have the viewership and the ratings for it. So then why would you go in public and then publicly state that you started filming something that you hadn't written and you were just going to make it up as you go along? Why would any other production company, like, why would anyone else produce anything that you will ever write in the future then? Genuine question. I don't understand. Like, I'm just so flabbergasted by how bad this ended up. I saw someone else on TikTok talking about how it could have been so much worse. And yes, it could have been. It could have been so much worse. But ultimately, I think it was not as bad as it could have been, considering the fact that they just didn't even know what was going on in their own show. Anyway, that's all I have to say, but I wanted to add this in here. I was going to say all this in the description, but I firmly believe that people don't really read descriptions because I don't. So I did want to add this little clip in here so that people know the additional information that has come out.
Moving forward with the future of the Duffers and of Stranger Things as a whole, I don't think they have any intention of stopping. The Duffer brothers have multiple spin-offs in the works. There's an animated series that takes place between seasons, I think 3 and 4, 4 and 5, 2 and 3. I don't know, it's in between one of the seasons. I don't really care that much to look it up again. As well as another spin-off series that handles the same world but different characters. I ultimately think that's gonna bomb really hard considering they already established that they don't know their own world. How are they writing another series in the same world? They're just gonna make up some more shit and butcher the timeline of all of the series. People are literally gonna tear that show apart, going, well, this timeline doesn't make any sense whatsoever because of X, Y, and Z. And then they're gonna come out and release a statement and be like, well, give us a break. It actually isn't in the same world. It's actually loosely inspired and it's a completely separate storyline, and maybe you shouldn't have called us out on it. Oh my god. The Duffers have also signed a contract with Paramount and started their own company, Upside Down Productions, with 2 other TV series in the works. I saw like something get released that one of their TV series was like canceled right after, or like the production was canceled right after the season 5 finale aired and all of the backlash, which is kind of funny to me. Kind of in that same route, I think the hype will eventually die down. Plenty of people will give these other shows a try, myself included, probably if they're talked about enough in pop culture and social media. But the Duffer brothers have lost trust with their audience. A large portion of fans will not continue to watch their stuff because why would you commit time and energy into a show when the first one ended so badly? I'm sure a lot of people will still tune in because they are searching for the magic of the first seasons of Stranger Things. But ultimately, if the other shows have bad first seasons, they will continue to lose more and more of their audience until their shows stop getting picked up for production due to a lack of audience. I can admit that maybe I'm wrong with that because I did think the same with Game of Thrones. After everyone talked about Game of Thrones having one of the worst endings in TV history, I thought there was no chance in hell that anyone would pick up the like spin-off Game of Thrones show. I can't even think of what it's called now because I'm not a Game of Thrones fan. I think that the spin-off has been relatively popular. Maybe, again, I'm not a fan, so I don't know much about that. Maybe it's because it's different writers, but I can't imagine picking up a show that's a spin-off of a show that had the worst ending in TV history. and especially if it had the same writers. But I'm not knowledgeable about that. I just throw it out there because maybe I'm wrong about the Duffer Brothers, and like maybe people will still watch it no matter what because it's the Duffer Brothers. I don't know. One of the major things I wanted to discuss about Stranger Things season 5 is conformity gate. And if you didn't know, conformity gate is a massive conspiracy theory that was circling on the internet that the 8th episode we saw was not actually the finale, and instead all of the characters and the audience are under Vecna's curse. This theory hinged on the idea that there was a follow-up 9th episode being released on January 7th that would be the true ending to the show. Obviously, I am now filming this on January 9th, and there was no follow-up episode. I don't know when this video will go live, but I will assume there still will not be a follow-up episode being released. The stuff that I've seen online about conformity gate specifically states that the conformity gate theory is based on the idea that Vecna is controlling the narrative without the characters realizing it. Their lives are conforming to societal expectations, despite that being the exact opposite of the show's theme. The world depicted in the finale is a deception, a vision made by Vecna. Now, this is a fascinating theory to me. There's a long list of hints and clues for this. Some of them that I have seen include a post made by Finn Wolfhard where the D&D books are switched around. It spells out like lie with the books, the D&D books. It spells out like lie on the spines of the books. Unexplained questions and plot holes like why did Will mention milkshakes at Melvald's? Because this is a hardware store, and I guess it would have had milkshakes like in Henry's timeline, but not Will's. Why was Lucas emphasizing November 6th? Why was Will's birthday an age forgotten by Joyce? People in the finale standing like Vecna and having the same haircut as Vecna. Lucas claiming, I don't believe in coincidences. The WSQK archive and radio static. Repetition of he lies and this isn't real. Obvious mistakes of memories in Henry's mind, parallels to the Truman Show. I won't continue to list them. I'm sure I could do like a whole 20-minute video just on conformity gate. There are tons and tons of videos on TikTok where people break down these hints and clues and the theory as a whole. So if you are really interested in this theory, you can go see more videos on it. It's genuinely a truly crazy concept. It kind of relates to Noah Schnapp saying in an interview that the fans are better writers than the Duffers with all the theories they came up with. While some of these explanations make sense to me, I do believe a lot of it is people grasping at the smallest straws possible. They're basically going through the stages of grief and are still in denial and refusing to accept the finale. Some other people have made a lot of comparisons to BBC's Sherlock, when it was believed that there would be a secret episode or season released. Overall, every explanation video I have seen about conformity gate has made the person posting it look genuinely insane. This is a immersive experience, and the fans now feel like Joyce in season 1, like we're living in the story, which is so funny. This would be a crazy thing to actually happen, but I don't believe the theories personally. I subscribe to the belief that the Duffer brothers are just bad writers. It goes back to the idea that giving 2 to 3 years between seasons is just way too much time for people to theorize, rewatch, and break down all previous seasons for clues, especially considering the press build up to the finale. It was incredibly underwhelming. But all in all, the concept of writing a finale so bad that your fans don't think it's real is so hilarious. I can, however, admit that the more I see of it and the further down the rabbit hole I go, the more I believe the theory. And while I want to believe, the biggest clues to me that the finale are real is the cast reactions. When watching interviews with Noah and Millie about the ending, they both look like they fear the fans' reactions. They look like they hated it just as much as the fans do, but can't say too much without spoiling and making everyone mad. The theory itself is rooted in the idea that the Duffer brothers are geniuses who planned all this out ahead of time and intentionally planted all these seeds. And I'm sorry, but this is kind of delusional to me. Like I said, I subscribe to the idea that the Duffer brothers are just bad writers who do not know the show that well. and the fans just know the show better, so they can come up with all these theories. If it were to end up happening with another episode getting dropped sometime in the near future, I will happily eat my words and admit that I was wrong and people are not crazy, but I just don't see it happening. I did see someone in a comment section saying that they loved the idea of the fans taking the story and running with it and twisting it into something else, because that is really fun and it's something that TV hasn't had in a long time. And I do really agree with that. I really appreciate the sense of community and really intense fandom that's coming with this theory. But I do reject the notion that we should have faith in the genius of the writers. That's all. On that same note about commenters, I saw someone else comment while people were not believing in the storyline of another episode dropping, the conformity gate video theories were making people believe that Vecna truly won in the end rather than them defeating him, which I think is a super interesting angle as well. Now I'm gonna start wrapping all of my thoughts up. I know this has been a long video, so thank you so much if you stuck with me for everything. My problem as a whole is the formatting, and that was always the problem for me. 3 years between seasons is way too long. Casual watchers forget everything that happened in the previous seasons, whereas devoted fans spend extra time rewatching the release seasons, diving into the production, and noting every detail just in case it's important later. I saw someone make a video about the fact that the Duffers have always praised themselves on being super detailed writers and how everything matters. And so the fans picked up on that and ran with it. And then come season 5, nothing mattered. So it was like this weird shift that no one knew what to do with. This is something I've always had issues with because of the trend in TV it caused. Not to mention the cast grew up too much throughout the show and lost its spark. But I did see people on TikTok discussing the issues surrounding the time between seasons as well, mainly stating that it allows extra time for people to come through the previous seasons for clues, but it also leaves too much room for the imagination. I've kind of said this quite a few times already throughout this video. Fans are super smart and creative, and they will write a better ending for you if you give them enough time. They were given the time and they created infinitely better endings, which is why Conformity Gate blew up. Come the last season, it was super hyped up. There were hints and clues to how things would end, and not only was it poorly written, but the clues no longer made any sense. A traitor, 5 confirmed deaths, who opened the door. Side note, the whole who opened the door thing is crazy, considering so many people were like, oh, 11 in season 1, she says, I opened it, I'm the monster, and so she's talking about the door, she opened the door, and then it's like, is media literacy dead? Because in the first season, she very clearly states the gate, I opened it, I'm the monster, as in the portal to the upside down, not the door. I don't know why people were thinking that she was talking about the freaking door for Will. I will shout out Stranger Things Talk on TikTok. That's an account on TikTok who is now breaking everything down to explain why nothing made sense. And I recommend that if you really like the show, she is far more committed than me and more educated about the show as a whole. So she is definitely someone to follow along her journey of complaining about the show for the near future if you're interested. This was a generational fumble by the writers and will probably go down in history as one of the worst endings, up there with The 100, Game of Thrones, and Supernatural. That one still hurts me, but I have to admit the ending was one of its faults. The whole thing was incredibly chaotic and made no sense whatsoever. They spent the whole season trying to rewrite past lore and piecing together random emotional monologues that meant nothing. Everyone thought that season 5 would lead to the Duffers killing off half the cast. They can do that now with no fear of losing viewers because it is the last season. That led to months and months of theories about the ending and big reveals to come and hypotheses about who had the greatest chances of dying, but in the end, there was no impact of anything. They may as well have gone with the terrible ending that the whole thing was one big D&D campaign, because that would have been just as bad. And that was probably one of the most popular theories that I had seen. Well, I can't wait for the next clusterfuck that the Duffer brothers bring to life. I have now accepted the ending. I did, however, have less grieving to do than others, so my heart goes out to you who are still grieving this show. and I am now ready to move on to the next show. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel to see any upcoming videos, check out any of my previous videos, give this video a like, and comment down below to let me know your thoughts and opinions about the show as a whole, the finale, this video, any upcoming shows that you would like me to watch. Thank you so much again for watching. Bye!